We got other major news in the Indiana football apparatus. Oh, quick, not throwaway, not really. College football 26 dropped their trailer. It was a 2-minute trailer. No Indiana, kind of pissed me off. You got Indiana on both.
Pasadena mentioned though.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
You got Indiana on both versions of the cover, which pretty cool, but they're not featured prominently. I felt like I created a much cooler cover. It's pinned to the Sigs Inside Pod Twitter account. So if you want to check out the All America edition, if we could, I guess, drum up enough support, hopefully we could get D'Lo, Fish, and Kamara.
I know it's a lighting thing, but one thing I noticed from your edit was that every single jersey had a different shade of red.
I know that wasn't. I didn't do any editing. I literally just cut them out of the picture on Google. Like it is very like.
Well, yeah,
there's not a ton of polish on these.
Made this.
Yeah.
Definitely gives that vibe.
100%. But we did get confirmation that Sig, Shanahan, and Brian Haynes all three of them will be in the game. So if you are a huge college football game fan of the game like I am, and you are going to play a lot of that game, like I'm not going to create a coach this year. Like I'm just going to run with the boys. Like I'm good.
Yeah, I felt like when I did Dynasty, they made me make a coach, but maybe just like
No, you can choose to be like the incumbent coach, but there were no coach likenesses in the game last year, so it was like Jim Fish with like the Indiana playbook. It's stupid, but this year they actually have the licenses.
Love it. Yeah, John, you gotta get on Twitter. You got to.
But what really got people talking last week, specifically in terms of Indiana, was we got it wasn't the schedule release because the schedule has been out forever, but we got the like game time release, or the times that these games are going to be played. People lost their shit about Indiana's non-con. Mainly people south of the Mason-Dixon line, mainly people that wear crimson, completely lost their shit about Indiana's non-con. Like they don't have better things to worry about at the end of May. It was kind of ridiculous to see the pushback. I guess like we have two FS1 games in the non-con and the Purdue game 7:30 on Peacock. But what do you think of the pushback on the non-con?
I mean, this it always brings back to just the brand brain that people have in the SEC. It's like they think they're the league's above everyone else. It's a perception thing. You know, they have these metrics that are clearly biased in the preseason, like the FPI, that are, you know, still going to hold weight come. So, you know, when they're weighted in the preseason, where it's a predictive metric that is based on, you know, like returning production, just basically like not made up stats, but like theory. It's all theoretical, right? So these theoretical metrics come out. They rank the SEC, you know, 12 in the top 25. Then 13. They play out their schedule, and guess what? They're all in the top 10 in strength of schedule because they play each other. But like in reality, we don't know how good these teams are compared to one another. I'm just going to run through Indiana's football schedule real quick and just go just based on like just general historical success. Start at Illinois, whatever. Iowa. And Illinois is going to be good this year. So I'm like discarding Illinois in this situation because I don't think they have like this great, you know, historical thing that they can hang their hat on. I don't think they've been this relevant since Rashard Mendenhall was there and Juice Williams. Like they've had a big lull, but like we got to face Iowa, Oregon, Michigan State, UCLA, Penn State, Wisconsin. Those are multiple time Rose Bowl champions, like league champions, great history, top 20, top 25 historically, all 6 of those programs. And Indiana has to face them. So, you know, you don't know in a given year who's better. The last 2 national champs have been Big Ten teams. We all saw, you know, they call them meaningless games, but I saw Michigan roll out their 2s and absolutely curb stomp Alabama 1s last year. I saw Brett Bielema put Shane Beamer in a blender. Like, dude didn't know what was going on. That was if you watch that game, that was the most intense bowl game that wasn't a playoff game by far. Like, they all brought their A game. They were going at it. 2 really good teams. Illinois came out on top. Last year, you have multiple examples of how the Big Ten was just better than the SEC last year. And they're going to redo that narrative over and over and over again, pounding their chests basically over the fact that Nick Saban did had a dynasty that we will never ever see in the sport again, ever. We'll never see it. It won't happen. And that was, I was looking at some of those past FBIs. Like there was a season where it was just Bama and Georgia at the top, and then the rest of the SEC was just irrelevant. Like outside, in a SEC bias metric, they're all outside the top 20 besides Bama and Alabama, or Bama and Georgia at the top. So to tell me that every year the SEC is better, I just think it's ludicrous. I wanted to see it played out on the field. Now, there's going to be SEC and Big Ten matchups this year, and if the SEC shows their dominance, I'm gonna let them have that year. But the reality is, the past 2 years, it's been Big Ten dominant, top to bottom, especially last year.
100%. I want to split two of the things you said, because you talked about the schedule a little bit, then you also talked about Big Ten, SEC, and kind of the conference dynamics there. Carla Jenkins made a point here in the chat that the schedule was set years ago. There was a Michigan State journalist that made a crack about like Cignetti getting an easy role again, essentially insinuating that like Indiana is prepping these schedules and like putting them out immediately. It's like these, again, this is a schedule that was created in the vision of Tom Allen's Indiana football. This wasn't the standard that we're seeing today, and like the expectation that they're going to be a 10-win football program. Like that wasn't the reality when this schedule was set. So it's like the fact that all these people are A, freaking out about it, but B, blaming Cignetti for the fact that the schedule wasn't murderer's row. When you look at like I believe it was it Martha the Mop Lady that put out the graphic of all of the SEC non-cons? If you just took out the one Power 4 team they all play, because they only play 8 conference games, like it's like their non-cons are gross. Like Penn State's non-con is gross. Like
everyone does the same thing. The reality of the situation is that Indiana still has to go 7-2 in conference play to even be considered for the playoff. That's 100%. The reality. And that's not easy with a Big Ten schedule. I don't care. You want to throw bias and scoff and brain at it and try to point holes into it. You can do that all you want. Michigan State, you got to come with your A game. UCLA, you got to come with your A game, or else you're going to lose. That's just how it goes. Same goes for playing Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. And that's and Bama lost to those games, and that's why they're out. They're not out.
Yeah, well, that's why
like if Alabama was 11-1 and Indiana was 11-1, it's a completely different debate. The reality 100%. Is this idea of like best teams based on these predictive models. Like, yeah, Alabama probably would have been a betting favorite against Indiana if they played in the playoff last year. That does not mean that they should be in the playoff over Indiana, because it as much as we want to say we want the best teams in the playoff, that's just not how sports works. Sports works by having the most deserving teams. In the NFL, it's strictly on, it's the professionals. It's strictly based on, your records. And then in college, it's somewhat like that, heavyweight on the records. Do you win 10 games? And then from there, a tiebreaker could be, if you have 2 10-2 teams for the last 12th spot, it comes down to who do you think is better? And then that's when the debate is held. The reality of the situation, it was a very clear-cut 12-team playoff. And let's not forget that SEC was absolutely thrown a bone in a very clear-cut case to where Florida State, an undefeated ACC champion, should have been in over Alabama. Because we had three, if you don't see my fingers, three undefeated conference champs. They're in. Power 5, they're in. Washington, it was Washington, Florida State, and Michigan that year. And then it came down to 2 one-loss conference champions, Texas and Alabama. Just so happened, usually you debate that out and then it'd be like, okay, Bama's probably better. What happened is that they actually played that year and Texas won. So Texas should have been in over Bama, leaving Bama as the first out. It's asinine how this brand bias has gone.
Well, yeah,
and obviously we know it's because SEC and ESPN are in bed together, and with the CFP, they're running a little 3-way, whatever you want to call it. And it's that's the only thing that's messing with the integrity of the sport, not any of this, NIL and transfer portal. And
I mean, we'll get to that in a second, but I do think it's telling that you have the largest noise about playoff expansion coming from the SEC, and that this wouldn't be an issue if they were worried about how many teams they were going to be able to get into the current format. And for whatever reason, you have this league that claims it's the biggest and the baddest and the best, trying to be the most vocal and most active in changing the rules. So if they were really that comfortable about their standing and where they were in the sport, there wouldn't be this much, like, there just wouldn't be this much commotion in terms of like the way it's regulated. They just wouldn't care. And the fact that you're seeing the power dynamic shift, that's why things are getting so wonky. It's because that like really the SEC doesn't know how to respond to that shift in power.
Yeah, yeah, I think you nailed it around the head. They don't know how to handle it, which is why we see so much noise, specifically from Alabama, who doesn't understand. Like, they saw something, which I totally get. Like, they saw something that we will never see in the sport again. Those days are over. Like, you are just still Alabama, will be respected when you guys step on a field with anyone. At the end of the day, it's not Nick Saban's Bama that was curb stomping top 15 teams by 30 and 40, and then they throw in their 2s and 3s in the fourth quarter. Like that's something we just won't see again, especially with the portal. And then SoCal Hot Sauce brings up a good question that I want to jump on real quick. How do they make it less objective? I think you keep the 12-team playoff and you bring back the BCS model. I think, I love the no. Hear me out. It's always been crazy similar to, however, my narrative would have had Bama in over SMU last year, but I digress. I still think it makes it less objective because it's a composite poll of the AP, so the media gets a little share, coaches poll, and then 3 unbiased computer rankings. It's a composite of all 5 polls. And then you just use the same format. That's your top 25, and then use that 12-team format that's now been introduced to select the field. It's really that simple. That's how you make it less subjective.
That's fair. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I don't really have
to.
I like the 12-team
like
playoff.
That narrative goes against my other narrative of SMU being in over Alabama, because the BCS would have had SMU in, because it would have knocked them down for that loss. Now I'd argue that's why the committee's good, because if they were to use that BCS metric and then see that, they can correct it. That's what's good about the committee. The problem is that they're clearly in bed with the SEC, and that's just a big problem that probably won't get fixed ever. So,
well, I think the frustrating part is
preaching to the choir here.
Is that the SEC bias very clearly exists, and they're still the ones complaining that they're not being treated well enough. I think that's the biggest or the most frustrating part. But they're
that delusional, and you ever talk to them online, like, they're not much different than the Nebraska fans in that it's like, okay, you're not. We do not test the same in high school. I'll just say that. Just go on a win, and I don't think we scored the same in math on
there was some
shots at the South for being dumb. It's low hanging fruit, but I'm gonna keep doing it anyways, because they just piss me off.
Two things to kind of wrap up this conversation. There was some chat talk about which game potentially would be harder to win between Oregon and Penn State. If you go by what like the metrics Big Ten Huddle tweeted out about everybody's hardest game this year, Indiana's hardest game is going to be at Penn State. They have a 25% chance to win that though. And they did avoid the whiteout game. The whiteout game is going to be early in the season against I forget who it's going to
Oregon,
be against, but it's
Oregon NBC.
Oh yeah.
They announced some of the times of is that what you're just talking about, of our schedule? We got Friday night. Yeah,
we let it. That's how I led into this conversation before you jumped all over me.
Sorry. I'm just really excited because I've approached this show very differently in the last few weeks or so. I don't know if you guys have noticed the energy I'm bringing, but
he's locked in.
I'm as locked in as ever.
What do you think it's weird? 25% chance to win. I thought it was higher than I thought it was going to be. And
if you told us that I'm less or more confident to win, like our toughest game is 20, like back like let's flash back 2 years ago. Like we probably had 6 games where we had less than a 25% chance to win. Like, and now our most difficult one is at 25%, and it's a road game against Penn State. And you're telling me you have a 1 in 4 shot of winning? Crazy.
Yeah, give
You
me
know,
those odds
even
all
though it's
day.
not a whiteout game, it's still Penn State. They're going to be playing Mo Bamba. It's going to be loud. Probably going to be similar to a whiteout environment, considering it's a late November game. Probably going to impact who's playing in the Big Ten championship game. Considering we're probably going to go into Eugene and win because Dante Moore is going to throw like 5 picks, 3 pick sixes. D'Angelo Pons. It's going to be one of those just absolute belt to ass. But yeah. Yeah, it's not surprising. They're just predictive measures, and we'll probably be 8.5-point dogs going to that, regardless of what happens. So,
Abel says we will beat Oregon. Our QB is many levels better than theirs, and we return most of all our studs. Yeah, we did. And also,
Abel have been on the Eugene road win for a while now.
Shout out to Buffton Prime, but he gave some love to Lewis Moore. He gave some love to Jonathan Brady. Obviously, he was a huge fan of Hosea Wheeler. You look at the transfers they brought in, and they're getting love from the right places, even if it's not from the national media. So, very much a lot to be excited about.
John brings up a good point. The FPI gives us even a chance to win the Natty preseason, which has never happened before in this game of college football, that we've been doing for like 120 years. Indiana been playing it. By the way, are we going to talk about 1945, or is that going to be?
Oh my God! Yeah, no, we are going to talk about 45.
Yeah, how we're claiming a national title in 1945, like because I'm pretty sure
I'm staring at my notes, going, I'm missing something here.
Ohio State claimed one in 1945. They finished 12th in the country that year and didn't even win the Big Ten because we did. We were the undefeated Big Ten champs, undisputed, not no tie, no nothing. Anyways, outscored 4 opponents in the last 4 games, 140-6, including 2 ranked teams, Purdue and Iowa that year. It went 9-0 and 1 tie, which was a week 2 tie to. Oh, was that George Taliaferro? Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, we're claiming that.
It's our title, baby. 45, baby. It's ours.
Oh,
shout out to the Crimson.
John was probably in the stands.
Shout out to the Crimson Cast for bringing that to our attention, tweeting that out the other day. And yeah, we're full blown behind that. Full push. Indiana Hoosiers Live, Indiana at the Voice of College Football, full blown supports the Indiana's claim for the 1945 national title.
Yeah. If anyone tries to bring up history, just tell them about the 1945 national championship team. How about that?
With George Taliaferro
with UCLA, who is borderline top 20 program all time. So it's pretty good. Oregon has 0.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
45, baby. 45.
You can almost guarantee you there's not a season back that, like, pre-Phil Knight, Oregon football was like the most irrelevant school in the pack, like way back in the day. And then Phil Knight kind of changed everything. So, they still haven't won one.
I wanted to ask you, Brad.
John was not in attendance during 45.
Before he said, I was about to say, it's probably a little.
That was definitely a joke. I was not being serious by any means. I was totally yanking on John's chain there because John is OG. First live show we did, John was on. So thank you, John.
There was